The development of martial arts has often been at the forefront of physical competition and military training, where doing anything to get an upper hand over your opponent can mean the difference between victory or defeat. Today we'll be taking a quick look at some of the greatest close combat techniques we've been able to develop over the last millennium. This is 5 of the best martial arts and their origins. Number 5. Jujitsu. Jujitsu first originated in Japan, and later moved to South America with the Japanese diplomat Mitsuo Maeda, which would lead to the eventual development of modern Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Dating back to the 11th century AD, many forms of Jiu-Jitsu extensively taught parrying and counter-attacking long weapons, such as swords or spears via a dagger or other smaller weapons. Some smaller dojos that focused on hand-to-hand fighting, such as joint locks and chokes, would soon see massive popularity over time. In the early 17th century during the Edo period, Jiu-Jitsu would continue to evolve due to weapons and armor becoming unused decorative items, and hand-to-hand combat flourishing as a form of self-defense with new techniques being created, adapting to the changing situation of unarmored opponents. This included the development of various striking techniques, which expanded upon the limited striking previously found in Jiu-Jitsu, which targeted vital areas above the shoulders such as the eyes or throat. Towards the 18th century, the number of striking techniques was severely reduced as they were considered less effective and exerted too much energy. Instead, striking in Jiu-Jitsu primarily became used as a way to distract the opponent, or to unbalance them in the lead-up to a joint lock, strangle or throw. In 1914, Mitsuo Maeda brought Jiu-Jitsu to Brazil and agreed to teach the art to a few select students, including Carlos Gracie. This is where its emphasis shifted to ground fighting. The Gracie family thought that it was easier to learn than throws and stand-up grappling, making it far more efficient and practical. Number 4. Muay Thai. The history of Muay Thai can be traced at least to the 16th century as a peacetime martial art practiced by the soldiers of King Narisuan, as well as being a practical fighting technique for use in actual warfare. An urban legend started being told by Thai people in 1767, around the time of the fall of the ancient Siamese capital of Ayutthaya, when the invading Burmese troops rounded up thousands of Siamese citizens. According to the folklore story, at one point the Burmese king Mengra wanted to see how Thai fighters would compare to his men. A Thai man named Nai Kanamtom was selected to fight against the king's chosen champion, and the boxing ring was set up in front of the throne. When the fight began, Nai Kanamtom charged out, using his Muay Thai techniques to pummel his opponent until he collapsed. The king supposedly asked if he would fight 9 other Burmese champions to prove himself. He agreed, and fought one after the other with no rest periods. His last opponent was a great kickboxing teacher from Rakhine, of whom he defeated with vicious kicks. To commemorate the story of Nai Kanam Tom, the Muay Thai festival is staged annually every year on March 17th. Muay Thai is often a fighting art of attrition, where opponents exchange blows with one another, as is the case with traditional styles in Thailand. Almost all techniques in Muay Thai use the entire body movement, rotating the hip with each kick, punch, elbow and knee in order to generate as much power as possible. It became widespread internationally in the late 20th to 21st century, when westernized practitioners from Thailand began competing in kickboxing and mixed rules matches as well as matches under Muay Thai rules around the world. Number 3. Sambo. Sambo is a Soviet-origin Russian martial art. Its early development stemmed from the independent efforts of Vasily Oshepkov and Viktor Spiridonov to integrate the techniques of catch wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, and other foreign martial arts into native wrestling styles. In 1918, Vladimir Lenin created a general military training program in order to train the Red Army in military hand-to-hand combat. Training fell to Kliment Voroshilov, who in turn created the NKVD Physical Training Center, Dynamo Sports Society. A man named Spiridonov was a combat veteran of World War I and one of the first wrestling and self-defense instructors hired for Dynamo. His background included free wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. As a combative investigator for Dynamo, he traveled to Mongolia and China to observe their native fighting styles. In 1923, a grant from the Soviet government helped the Dynamo Sports Society to devise a combat style that integrated the most practical aspects of the world's top fighting systems. It would be one comprehensive style that could adapt to any threat. Sambo uses regular punches, kicks, elbows, and knees, as well as headbutts and groin strikes, in addition to throws and chokes. Eventually, a softer style called Samos was developed. It could be used by smaller and weaker practitioners, or even wounded soldiers and special government agents. The inspiration to develop Samos stemmed from study of World War I injuries, which left wounded soldiers vulnerable and restricted their ability to defend themselves in the close combat faced in trench warfare. Refined versions of Sambo are still used today, sometimes fused with other specific styles to meet the needs of Russian commandos. Number 2. Judo. The early history of Judo is inseparable from its founder, Japanese educator Kano Jigoro. Kano was born into a relatively affluent family, and would experience bullying at a young age. As a result, the young Kano would seek to find a local Jujitsu dojo. Early attempts to find a Jujitsu teacher who was willing to take him on were met with little success, as Jujitsu had become unfashionable in an increasingly westernized Japan, and many of those who had once taught the art had been forced out of teaching, or become so disillusioned with it that they had simply given up. After Kano had many failed attempts at finding a Jujitsu dojo, Nakai Umanari, an acquaintance of Kano's father and a former soldier, agreed to show him kata, an art often described as a sequence of karate moves organized into a pre-arranged fight against imaginary opponents. Several years would pass before he would finally find a willing teacher to take him in. In 1877, as a student at the Tokyo Keisei School, Kano learned that many Jujitsu teachers had been forced to pursue alternative careers, and in February 1882, Kano founded a school and dojo at a small Buddhist temple in what was then the Shitai ward of Tokyo. It was here that Kano would found Judo as a martial art. It was built around resisting a more powerful opponent, using leverage and adjustments to evade an opponent's attacks, causing them to lose their balance, and reducing their power, thus making it possible for a weaker opponent to beat significantly stronger ones, using a series of intricate sweep and throwing techniques to gain the upper hand, capitalizing with different limb locks and chokes, many of which were adapted directly from Jujitsu. The unique throws of Judo are some of the most effective ways of taking down an opponent, and is still incorporated into many different types of martial arts. Number 1. Mixed martial arts. Originally referred to as veiled Judo, an unarmed full-contact combat sport with relatively few rules, it became popular in Brazil during the 20th century and would eventually evolve into what we'd call modern mixed martial arts or MMA. The beginnings of MMA would begin in the mid-19th century, when the prominence of the new sport savate became popular in the combat sports circles. Contests occurred in the late 19th to mid-20th century between French salvatores and other combat styles, including a 1905 fight between a French salvator and a judo practitioner, which resulted in the judo combatant winning by submission, as well as in 1957 with a fight between a French salvator and a professional boxer Jacques Caron, as well as a young Japanese karate student named Mochizuki Hiru, which ended when Caron knocked Hiru out with a hook. The interest in mixing these different arts together and pitting them against each other proved to be quite popular, and during the late 1960s to early 1970s, the concept of combining the elements of multiple martial arts was popularized in the West by Bruce Lee via his system of Jeet Kune Do. Lee believed that the best fighter is not a boxer, karate or judo man. The best fighter is someone who can adapt to any style, to be formless, to adopt an individual's own style and not following the system of rigid techniques. In 2004, UFC president Dana White would call Lee the father of mixed martial arts, stating, "If you look at the way Bruce Lee trained, the way he fought, and many of the things he wrote, he said the perfect style was no style. You take a little something from everything. You take the good things from every different discipline, use what works, and you throw the rest away." MMA has done just that, and also only grown in popularity, becoming a worldwide phenomenon and reaching millions of people, leading to only further development of the art and raising the standard for professional close combat sports forever. That was 5 of the best martial arts and their origins. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.